Hi everyone, thanks for joining us Thursday evening. I know everyone has lots of busy lives, so thank you very much for tuning in. For those of you who haven't joined us on a Zoom session before, my name is Rachel Harper and I'm the Queensland Touch Football Marketing and Communications Manager. So as mentioned, a lot to get through, but just to run through quickly some housekeeping. We'll record this session so we can go through it and obviously distribute to those who are unable to attend this evening. I'm going to place you all on mute if you haven't done so already. If you can do that, otherwise I'll do that for you. That's just to ensure there's minimal interruption and background noise. If you can please now though, I might get you all to, in the chat function, just write your name, your organisation, affiliate region, where you're from and your position. And if you've got someone with you that's sitting on the call, chat their name in as well. That just lets us know who's attended the session this evening. I'll give an example. Just shot that through now. That'd be great. We'll have a Q&A session at the conclusion, section at the conclusion of this meeting tonight. You can send through any questions through the chat function throughout the evening. I just ask that you keep it to the chat function, just so we can keep things moving. We will answer as many questions as we can. If we require further information or are unable to answer or run out of time, we will come back to you. We'll look to provide some additional forums or just provide any updates on those questions post-meeting. So without further ado, I'll introduce Greg, Denny, Gavin, Shuka and Peter Tom. So Greg will chair this evening's session with the support of Gavin and Peter. Gavin is our Queensland Touch Football Chairman, who's had a long involvement with Queensland Touch Football and with the QTF board. So I'm sure a lot of you know Gavin. Peter is Director on the Queensland Touch Football Board and a member of the Governance Project Reference Group. And of course, many of you know Greg. Greg Denny is the interim QTF CEO and he's been with us at QTF for a number of years now as the General Manager of Operations. So what I might do, Greg, I'll hand over to you if you can obviously brief introductions to why we're all here and run through the agenda for this evening.
Sure, thanks Rachel. Thanks everyone for taking the time during the week, straight after work. We thought it was just time, given it's been a little period of time since the governance and operational review was completed. Obviously, a lot's happened during that period of time, both for the organisation and I guess in the context of COVID for sport generally. So we thought it was a good time to at least provide an update, give you some more information. Tonight we'll generally go through a recap, talk a little bit around the operational model and just take some questions and answers at the end. As Rachel said, it'll be difficult to get through all the questions, but we'll do our best to pull a lot of those questions together. There's a lot of, we had some pre-questions, so there's a lot of similar themes which we can hopefully cover during tonight or get to towards at the end. As I mentioned, it's obviously been a bit of a challenging time in sport generally. I think across touch football, when I talk about the staff, both at QTF and at regional level, it's been extremely difficult times from an organisational and personal perspective for a lot of the staff. Obviously, a lot are on JobKeeper. And in that time, we've, I guess, remained positive and continued to do as much as we can in pretty extreme, difficult times. And one of our key priorities was obviously getting affiliates back to play safely in a new COVID-safe environment. And thankfully, I guess across the state, we've achieved that in most parts, which is fantastic. Obviously, we've got a few events at the end of the year, which will hopefully provide a real opportunity for us to get together around the Festival of Touch. We'll have our second year of Queensland State Cup. For the first time as part of Festival of Touch, we'll have the opportunity to have an affiliate conference, which is something we've talked about for a long time. And we'll have the chance, hopefully, to deliver along with a sports performance conference, a Southeast Queensland Gala Day, and finishing up with the All Nations. So it's 5 events across 10 days. And I think that'll be a fantastic way to finish a pretty challenging year. I guess one of the real strong things about that is we've had great support from the City of Gold Coast around both the Festival of Touch and our events. And likewise, we've had Tourism Events Queensland involved for the first time. So I think there's some real positives that we can take out of the year, which is great. We're able to share those together at the end of the year. Without me talking too much further, I might take an opportunity to pass over to Peter Tong and Gavin to talk around the governance and operating review and where we are from there. So I'll hand over to Peter.
Good evening, everyone. Look, firstly, I know that the large group of you have already been part of the governance review in some shape or form, in the sense of some of the forums and some of the questionnaires that were handed out. But first and foremost, I just wanted to actually just touch on the intent of the actual governance review. It was noted quite a few, probably a couple of years now, that there was a real need to update our governance model, particularly in regards to some of the developments that were happening with Queensland government and also federal government. The actual governance review is the actual governance document that we have at the moment. The Constitution is a little bit outdated in regards to the requirements, particularly in today's society. And so there was a requirement to do that. We were lucky enough to get the assistance of Department of Sport and Rec, and they actually enabled us to access some funding to utilise Michael McLaughlin, who's an independent person who does this sort of work with all different sports right across the country. I wanted to actually just very quickly share with you just some short snippets of certain documents. And I'm wondering if I can share my screen here, Rachel. Is that possible?
Yeah, have a go.
Okay.
Should let you.
Going to go into, yes. So I just wanted to actually particularly start off with this document. I'm hoping everyone can see that. Can everyone see that?
Not yet.
No. Okay. Where am I? Zoom. Share screen. Bingo. Can everyone see that document?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. All right, so this document was actually released, although it says March 2020, it was actually released a little bit later than that. And it's from the federal government. And in particular, it is talking about the latest expectations around sport governance principles. And I want to just refer to a couple of things in that. And that's particularly around what they call collaborative governance. And this is what we're seeking to do as a board. And it's essentially that as a sport, we are hoping to get a whole of sport vision. And to actually achieve this, we can't do it alone. Our Queensland Touch Board cannot do it alone. We have to engage in the collective members that we have as Queensland Touch Football to actually make this a reality. And in this process, we actually had Michael McLaughlin go around essentially the state and access a series of forums, but also questionnaires, and ask questions about what people wanted. And that was the collaborative element that we wanted to get as much feedback as possible in regards to the governance review. If I go a little bit further, it talks about that it's a real requirement that organisations work collaboratively and cooperatively to benefit the sport. This is not a top-down model in the sense of this is how it's going to roll and you need to deal with it. It's not that. What it is essentially we are proposing a model that was recommended out of the governance review, and we're asking for dialogue and buy-in in regards to that. It's not a perfect model, and in fact, it may be something that will need to be tweaked, but it is something that we have out of the actual review itself. If I keep going on, it actually states that all boards have an objective to actually make the best decisions for the sport moving forward. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit in a moment about where Queensland government is looking in regards to their Activate Queensland. Our actual agreement with our development funding actually expires halfway through next year. And as you know, with COVID-19 and the current strains on budgets in government, it's highly likely it's going to be very difficult to actually access some of the funds that we've had in the past. The key factor for me is that I don't want to give the Queensland government, whether it be a current government or a new government, an excuse to actually diminish our ability to access funding. This document I've sent through to Rachel, and Rachel can share it with you via email at the right time, and the Activate Queensland one as well. I'm going to keep going. It is noted that it's not easy. So this structural change, there was no expectation that there was a timeline that this would happen. But we are realists. For us to have real constitutional change, we actually need 5 out of the 6 regions to agree that this is something that is best for the sport moving forward. At the moment, I don't believe we have that, and that's fine. However, it's not going to diminish the drive or the need that eventually we need to address the governance of this sport. So Activate Queensland, their plan is set in for 2019 to 22. Ours expires halfway through next year. We actually have to apply to the Queensland government or Sport and Rec in regards to what we're hoping to achieve and how we're going to achieve it, and are we able to deliver on the deliverables that we set out in that space. Currently, there are 6 sports that are at the top tier of funding, and we are not one of those. What you will note with all of those top 6 is that there is a very clear alignment in regards to their delivery of their sport, and that there is very limited pulling away from each other in direction. They're all pretty much lined in the one direction, and they're working towards a common goal. Some of the these are just the 4 areas, which is essentially Activate Queenslanders. So it's essentially getting people out and about, getting them active. One of the things that is located in this space is for those that are in social isolation, those with disability, those that are culturally different in regards to whether they're islanders or Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. There's also the ability to activate inside schools through a greater collaboration with the Department of Education, whether it be inside accessing students within schools or the actual settings themselves. The second part is activate enrolments, and that's essentially how you can actually deliver those deliverables in terms of spaces and locations, and how you can actually think outside the box to actually engage these people with the available environments. And keep in mind that green space is diminishing, particularly in areas that are got high density in them. The next one is essentially activate success, and we're talking about our high performance, how we actually ensure that as a sport, we actually got a really strong alignment in how we actually develop our coaches and our athlete pathways, and how we actually support our referees and all the elements in terms of high performance. This element also has an investment in terms of facilities as well. And then the next one is essentially activate collaboration. And this is where I think as a sport, the governance model is real critical. And you'll see in this one at 7.02, it talks about overhaul governance models to develop a framework that drives outcomes. What we're endeavouring to do from the governance review is to actually overhaul our governance model. And we need engagement in that space to actually make that a reality. What came out of the governance review was an overwhelming need and desire to actually make some changes. Now, how those changes actually look in the long term is very much dependent around the collaboration discussions that we have moving forward. There is no agenda in regards to how the sport is run apart from the models that were presented. And so we would like some engagement in that space. And we have had some engagement with certain regions in that area. If I move a little bit forward, there is also basically the need to look at, if you look at 7.05, it talks about the transition, the investment arrangement with state level organisations, that is QTF, Queensland Touch, to conditional funding. So no longer is it, we're just going to give you this money, it's conditional now over time to drive the achievement of government priorities. So as an organisation, if we don't actually meet the government priorities and we aren't able to prove that and actually have accountability over that, we will no longer get that funding. It's conditional. And one of the things that is located that is including gender equity and leadership positions. And over time, our board will need to actually have greater female participation on the board. All right, so at the moment, one of the things that, and I'm going to go back to stop sharing. As an organisation, as the current board, we've taken it upon ourselves to be as accountable as possible in regards to the deliverables that we seek to achieve. And as a result, our board has taken the decision to actually make sure that those development officers and those people that are tasked with that, achieving those deliverables are actually QTF employees. And that's a part of that accountability. It's not about anything else apart from ensuring that the standard and the quality and the expectations of those deliverables are there. Are we flexible enough to deliver on some of the elements of the Activate Queensland document? Possibly not in terms of the geographical areas, possibly not in some of the other areas as well. What we'd like to be is as flexible as possible and nimble in regards to those deliverables. The actual process of the governance review itself that Michael undertook was very collaborative. And the data that he collected was extensive. And if you had the opportunity to read the actual report that Michael McLaughlin actually completed and distributed, it was very, very extensive. There were recommendations that came from that were put to the PRG, and those recommendations were endorsed. As I said earlier, we're realists in the sense that we need actually 5 out of the 6 regions to actually be a part of any constitutional change moving forward, and I don't believe we have that at this point in time. So we do have some regions that have who have been willing to actually take the leap of faith and actually go through the experience and troubleshoot, because we will need to actually work our way through some of the issues that are part of this process. I know that QTF has received a series of questions in relation to the governance review and how it would look if we actually made some governance change. And they're really valid questions, and a lot of them we wouldn't actually have an answer for yet, because we need to collaborate with you. We need to collaborate with you in regards to how that would look and how that would actually feel, and the elements that are important to each area, to make sure that it is as a reflective of a document that is, as a sport, we're all moving in the one direction. I wanted to take this opportunity to hand over to Matt Gilbinson, because Matt is the SQBD president, and their region took it upon themselves to actually be a part of this this new process, or this new model. And I'm really quite keen for Matthew just to essentially share his experiences. I did check with him this morning, just said, look, mate, all I want you to do is just share the experience. So I'm going to hand over to Matt, and just from SQBD's experience, can you talk us through what it was like and what the reality is for you?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Happy to share what we've gone through. And if I raise anything here that people want to ask me, I'm available. My number's pretty available out there. So if you want to call me and ask me questions or through the chat, please do so. But just a very brief background, Peter. You mentioned and you highlighted a piece in one of those slides there which said that we want governance change that's focused on outcomes. And, you know, we were looking for outcomes too, because through participation in the governance review and on reading and talking about the findings, it became very clear that the affiliates have been asking and are asking for the regions to get out of the way, as it were, with regards to delivery of the sport. They want more help. They wanted direct communication with QTF more than what we were allowing them to have. And when we analysed that against our actual business at SQBD, it became really apparent we were and are the dearest region in the state to play touch football at. Our regional fee is higher than anyone else's. Yet we retained no surplus funds. And we spent on a business income of about $750,000 a year. We spend approximately $250,000 a year on administration. Now that's not sport development. That sport development money was coming from QTF as handouts and a development officer. That's an awful lot of money to spend on administrative tasks when Queensland are administering the sport, as are 5 other regions in addition to us. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And what outcomes were we getting? Well, our year-on-year outcomes were declining participation. So we took this opportunity to jump on board with you guys and say, well, let's have a look at what we could do with that HR spend and turn it into outcomes for affiliates. Now, of course, as soon as we jumped on board, COVID hit, and so all the best laid plans were delayed somewhat. But what we've been able to do is to refocus our administrative roles into affiliate servicing roles, and to work really closely with Greg and Fee in particular at QTF on some of the administration heavy tasks that we still needed to find ways to get done. And so one of the immediate benefits we've had out of this jump, if you like, you call it a leap of faith, but this jump into outcomes focused delivery of the sport has been we're part of a bigger team. It's not just the SQBD board and the SQBD affiliates, but if I'm talking to Mark Tipple, our affiliate services manager, he's in conversation with Greg and with Tristan and with whoever else they need to be in conversation with at QTF, looking at the state-based perspective and bringing our local perspective and marrying the two together. And that's given us some really great traction. And a practical example of that is we're talking to a small affiliate out in the western area of our region here. And this is an unaffiliated competition that's just starting. Reached out to Mark Tipple, our affiliate services manager. And so I get called into a meeting with the potential new affiliate. Tristan Manor attends. We're on the phone with Greg Denny, and we're talking to this new customer that we can service. And here's all the services we can offer. And when that person says to us, what do we get for affiliation? We say, well, you've got 3 people in the room here, 2 from the region, 1 from Queensland, and there's another guy from Queensland on the phone. And these are the resources around you. It's a very different experience to the isolated one we were giving when it was just the region doing the work. And so now now that we're back to sport and we're playing at most of our affiliates, we're now in conversations on a weekly basis with Greg, with Gav, with Fiona about what we can do to develop the sport. Where can we invest money that we're generating, that SQBD is generating? Where can we turn that money into feet on the ground, delivering outcomes for our existing affiliates and into areas where we don't have affiliates? So, you know, for us, it's been a huge shift in thinking, and no doubt there's been some teething problems, and there will be continued teething problems as we evolve, but it's been a great evolution and a very collaborative approach to delivering outcomes for our affiliates. And that's what we're here to do.
Matt, can I ask you a question? Do you actually feel there was a takeover of your region in any way?
The opposite is true, I believe. It's not a takeover in any way. What we've gained is a significantly closer relationship with the sports governance and peak body in Queensland Touch. You know, and even right down to, you know, we employ a couple of affiliates people. So, for example, a Palm Beach Touch coordinator is one of our employees employed by Queensland Touch. So a Sharks employee through Queensland Touch's management agreement with us. You know, he's able to sit as an affiliate-based manager in conversations with the affiliate services manager and Greg Denny and the professional people around them, you know, in conversations every single day. Whereas if he was Mitch, the competition coordinator for SQBD, there's no way he's involved in those conversations. We've opened ourselves up to a broader perspective than what we ever had before. So it's the reverse of a takeover. We feel like we've gained a whole lot of vision into where the sport's going.
And can you just talk about the finances in terms of, you know, SQBD monies? Because is it something that, you know, QTF hasn't got access to your money? Is that correct?
Well, they do have access to our money because we gave it to them. But having said that, we're happy to give it to them because we have full transparency of what's happening. And we want Fiona to pay the bills. I don't want Mark Tipple paying the bills. I want Fiona, that's her job as your finance person at Queensland Touch, to be paying our bills and to be managing our finances. You know, why we spent 40 grand a year plus on a finance person, that we're now spending a small fraction of that in a shared service agreement with Queensland Touch. It's a no-brainer for us. But the money's fully accountable to SQBD. It's an SQBD cost centre. It's SQBD's money. We get to decide as an SQBD board where that's going to go, what's going to happen with it. But we gain the advantage of putting our plans in front of you guys and Greg and the team and saying, this is what we want to spend our money on. Can you give us some advice? Is this what we should be doing? And is this what's working elsewhere? Or is there something in here we've missed in our planning? So again, the key point there is the broader collaboration and the bigger view that we're getting on what we're doing.
Thanks, Matt.
Maddie, can I just ask a quick one? Does that also cross over into the development side of things as well?
Absolutely. You know, sport development needs to be owned by the sport, in my opinion, Gav. This is only Matt Gilbertson talking. That's not the president talking. That's just, you know, the idea, again, it's replication, right? Why would we want 7 entities in the state of Queensland developing the sport in their own unique way? What if we had, you know, statewide development that was influenced locally? What about that? Would that be a better model? And I also believe that fundamentally our historic sport developer has been hamstrung. They're asked to do too many things too well. We're asking, generally speaking, a junior employee employed as a development officer to be a great coach facilitator, you know, referee facilitator, junior coach, beginners coach, representative pathway expert. It's just not possible. What if we were able to develop sport development with much more specialized focus and individuals who are specialized in specific areas? Maybe we've got a bunch of individuals that are great at getting into schools. Why don't we task them with getting into schools on behalf of our affiliates wherever they can get to? Why would it be limited to SQBD? And it's a little bit easier, I suppose, for us in SQBD. If we've got a development officer that's doing some work up at Redlands and it's next door to Brisbane, and the next school wants them to go in there, why wouldn't that be a good thing? Why would we want to stop that from happening if the economies of scale mean that the borders can be blurred? Because the results are going to come back to us anyway, right? The kids are going to come and play at the affiliate at Redlands, at the affiliate at Northern Gold Coast, or wherever it happens to be. As long as the development's being done, and importantly, as long as it's being coordinated effectively. And I would like to personally make the point, right, that we have historically spent far too much money on administration, and administration is not development. And you know, if we want our sport to thrive, the sports that are thriving are outcomes focused, and that actually means development focused. Yeah. So does that answer your question, Gav?
Yes, thanks, mate.
So, guys, I just want to note that what is currently happening inside our sport around the governance review, there's nothing radical about it. It's essentially what is happening with all sports going around the country. There are the governance reviews and the updating of their governance is actually happening. There's nothing radical in it. There's no agendas. We just want to collaboratively update our governance and move forward in a aligned fashion. There is the clock is ticking in regards to next year. Regardless, we will have to put some sort of submission in for funding. As a board, we would like to maximise our opportunities to actually gain as much funding as possible for our sport. At this point in time, we don't know which government will be in. We don't know what the financial constraints on their own budgets will be. And I definitely do not want to give them an excuse to actually give us less money to this sport. One of the elements that will come out of this process is, regardless of the direction we go, if we do not follow the recommendations, and that's fine as a sport if we decide that, I would imagine Queensland Government will ask why you did not follow those recommendations, coming out of the extensive collaboration feedback that Michael McLaughlin did, and the actual recommendations that were put out to the touch community. As I said, there's no hidden agendas, there's no radical takeovers. This is about moving this sport forward, and the overwhelming feedback that came through that governance review was that there is a desire to move it forward.
Tongi, can I just expand on that? And or you're saying that the Queensland government will review the funding, and really you have to look at the facts that they provided $60,000 for the actual governance review, and if they have put that money forward, and realistically as a sport we've come up with recommendations through that report and do nothing, then obviously there will be impacts, because or they could be positive or negative. Well, the feedback that we got that with the outcomes and the reviews, if that was put in place and everything went and moved forward well, then we had a chance of breaking into a top bracket. There's actually a top bracket of funding. There's 5 or so sports. There's cricket, soccer that are in a top bracket, which receive more funding, and there was a chance that we would be breaking into that type of atmosphere. Whereas if we do not have a look at the governance review and the outcomes, there is a chance that we could get the same, or we could get less. So it's really important that as a sport we have a look at these outcomes as a whole, and look at trying to move forward together.
Look, I agree, and I don't think you'll get anyone from Sport and Rec and or ministers on the record to say that funding may be in danger. But I'm a realist, and I look at the landscape out there at the moment. There is less money in government coffers than any other time in my lifetime. So the ability to actually gain funding and maximise our funding is absolutely critical. And from my perspective, I would like to minimise our risk in regards to that. That's all from me.
Thanks, Peter. Gavin, did you want to just touch on moving on through, just keeping in mind the time, development model? So
yeah, well, realistically, I could probably just extend what Tongi mentioned about the governance model, and try and link in the development with that. So for everyone who's read the recommendations, recommendation was 3.1 was about staff structure and aligning an efficient model, which refers to the DOs, the structure and so forth. And that was to be put in place before the actual recommendation 7.1, which was the governance model, which it says in there, and if you read it, the governance model is the most critical issue for future success. And it states about the new affiliate-based membership model should be implemented based on proportional voting tied to players' numbers at each affiliate. And Matt touched on it, that out of the review, that it was very clear that the affiliates wanted more of a say in the sport and wanted people to get out of the way, whether it be regional or, so they were very, and it's very true. I know most people here are from affiliate-based land, that they're very passionate about the sport, very passionate about coaching their own juniors, their own playing with their mates, and in reality, our governance model doesn't really indicate that. And And as Tongi said, that our governance model is showing that if you have a look at all governance models, they're driven from, well, private models top down, but all sports-based models are the affiliate voting all the way up and having a say. And at the moment, our model is in the middle. We've got a middle base where we having the actual direction of the sport or the say. So it's very clear that the affiliates, that was coming out of the review. So for people who hold powers in certain areas, they need to try and realise that the affiliates have spoken and need to try and have a look at that report and take a step back and have a look what is best for the sport. And full hats off to Matt and his board at SQBD. They've done that, and I think it's really important that you have a look at that, and also that you don't consider it as a takeover, because realistically it's a takeover for when you look at it. The affiliates are the ones that will get the say in what we're trying to do. So, and that includes from the development side of things, is that we want to try and make certain that the development is actually driven from all in a collaborative approach, as Tongi said, is that we're talking to affiliates, regions, anyone, to try and make certain that we're getting a development model. And Matt also touched base on it, that like the old, we need to stop thinking about the old thinking, as this review said, that with our traditional development officers, that they were, and they were different in every region, but like we had, traditionally you had one in Brisbane and they couldn't go to outside to Redlands because it was outside of their area, where realistically under the recommendation 3.1 is to get everything under for accountability, and also teachings, administration, to get everyone teaching the same values and also getting the same policies and structures, so that way the development officers around the state can be actually teaching the same things. And as was said earlier, that you can't expect too much of these the development officers to a point where they're trying to expect it to do a whole number of things. But if we can actually get policies and procedures and give them items that they can go out and teach from a state view, we're actually improving our development tenfold, because people are getting taught the same things around the entire state. Affiliates are getting the same messages. It just makes for, well, it's more accountable for our KPIs. It just makes absolute common sense. So to be short about that, that's really about the development, where we're heading, is that what we want to try and do. And COVID obviously made a hit into that, but as a board, we want to try and make sure we're, well, very shortly, once we're out of this COVID, is to try and make certain we're touching base with all the affiliates, regions, exactly what they want. And everything is different in, like, what works in Brisbane and South Queensland is not the same, or what will work in CQ. I know there's a lot of players used, and there's different systems that work. It's about working together, what's going to be working best. And that's what realistically we have to get to in the development side of things. But again, it was clear in the actual review that the staff structure had to be under a one team structure, which was, if you have a look at 3.1, that was it was really big, that one team was mentioned a lot. And to have one team, you have to be working under one banner, not having 7 different banners, but working under the one banner with the same structures and policies. And that was very clear. So, and it doesn't matter whether there's 6 or 20, but they're all teaching the same policies, procedures, the same techniques at playing, refereeing things. It was just, that was very clear. So, and that's really just to continue on from what Tongi said, and really just a quick chat about the development.
Thanks, Gavin. We might actually move on, just keeping a look at the time. We've had sort of a few questions come through, but I guess, Gavin, more broadly on the governance recommendations itself. So given, you know, we're in COVID, obviously it's been quite a challenging time. Is QTF continuing with all of the recommendations given this, you know, the current climate we're in? Like, is that the plan as we, you know, can you just shed some light on that for me?
Well, the recommendations are, well, obviously we released with a timeline of what we wanted to try and achieve. That obviously has been thrown out the window with COVID. Obviously the recommendations all got passed by the PRG. So, I mean, it's something that we want to achieve, but as Tongi said, it will be a matter of collaborating and making sure that everyone gets a say on, as Matt said, that there were always teething issues, but it's working out together what's for the betterment of the sport. So the idea is, yes, we want to try and get to that, but obviously timelines are a little bit different now, but it's about trying to make certain. And as it's been alluded to before, none of this really matters if we don't get that, don't get the governance change, which is the critical issue. Like I said, and I'll say it again, is that it was that 7.1 was very clear in the actual review that the affiliates should be the voting members, and that's where this comes down to, is that if the affiliates are voting the members, a lot of this other stuff will fall into line, but that's the key to it all.
Yeah. That's great. And I guess it was really great to hear from Matt and his experience as QBD. But in relation to the regional affiliation fees and the assets of that particular region, how will they be secured so as to guarantee that they are used in that region or in that former region as such?
Well, if you have a look at the actual the recommendations out of the review, is that, and there's a big lock and key on the actual things about this was like, change is very hard for people to, and I understand that, like, if you've been in the sport a long time and you've got a certain position that you've got in the sport, change is very hard, especially when you're used to running something same way in your, and the usual thing is, if it's not broken, why fix it? But when you look at it, it's very clear that our governance, we do need to change. So, but it's very clear in there about the asset side of things, and a few scared people get scared. And then I know there's been a couple of meetings. I know there was one held in November last year where people were saying that there's assets going to be stolen and from every affiliate and every region. But as Matt just testified, it's not about, QTF don't take any of the region's money. They get a cost code. They know exactly where it is. They decide where it's spent. The assets stay within the region. There is nothing taken from anyone. It's all collaborative, and so I mean, I think that answers that.
And within the governance review and recommendation, so the proposed public company limited by guarantee, how will the board, how will that be made up? Like, who will constitute the initial board, and for what period of time? There's been a few questions that have come through surrounding this.
And we've had a few questions around that. So what I would say to that is that rather than answering that here, there's probably 2 or 3 things that have come up. The questions, whether it be from affiliates, regions, that have all been generally run about the COVID. There's a few things about COVID, a few things about finance, a few things about the company by limited. So to me, is what we'll do is we'll try and get all them kind of combine all them questions, and I think we'll try and, even if we have another Zoom, but try and get those answers out to all affiliates and regions to try and, because there's a lot of little links in there. So I'll probably leave that one, Rach, and try and make sure we get that a little bit later on.
Yeah, no worries at all. And I guess, like you said, there has been a few questions around COVID, and this one might be best for Marnie. But just to clear up, I guess, some whispers and some doubt. Marnie, this is probably directed to you, but is the organisation financially secure, and will there be a flow-on effect through back to affiliates through increased costs or changes to responsibilities to ensure QTF's survival? Have there been any benefits come from this time?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Yeah, look, we were tracking really well, up to the end of February against our budget. So obviously the last few months has been, particularly challenging from a financial perspective, but that's no different to any other sport. We are really starting to see some positive signs now with that return to play and affiliates getting back to their competitions and the like. So we are financially sustainable. We are certainly not flush with funds that and that's to be expected given that we've had, you know, all of our staff on JobKeeper for the last 3 or 4 months and continue to do so. But we've taken some, you know, some very deliberate actions as a board and as a sport to support all of our affiliates throughout the state with reductions in affiliation fees for season 1. And look, honestly, that wasn't the case with a lot of sports that I've spoken to. In other sports, you know, they've just taken the cash and said, no, look, your competition started, you still need to pay all of your fees. But we certainly didn't want to do that. We've had some significant reductions in that. And our staff have been working, you know, pretty tirelessly. Like, we haven't had our 2020 results finalised and audited yet, and we're still working through that process. But yeah, we're very positive for the coming year for 2021. We've done our budgets. There's no budgeted increases for any affiliation fees and the like. So, and we're expecting that, you know, if we can continue to keep our competitions up and running and run our events, that we will, you know, be able to recover out of this over the coming 12 months.
And that's it, isn't it? Just uniting together, try and get us all back on the field safely. And it's a tough time for everyone, and our organisation isn't alone in that. Thanks, Marnie.
Certainly.
Greg, I might direct this next question to you, and Gavin touched on it earlier around the development model, but what is the scope of the development officer's role, and how are they building touch participation within the affiliates? How is this, what is the plan, and what involvement do affiliates have in these plans moving forward?
Thanks, Rach. Look, it's a question that's raised, and certainly with our 2 of the organisations that we manage, it's a question that's raised rather consistently, sorry. And it probably relates to, the question is what is their role and what are their priorities? And that's a piece of work we really need to look into and really get some defined strategy around what's our engagement with affiliates, what's our engagement with schools, and what's our strategy and how much resource have we got. So I guess they're questions that we are currently working through. They're questions that we get from the affiliates that we manage, and we're looking through models that work. We're having discussions with NRL to look at how they do that in terms of the Queensland Rugby League sense. What can we learn? What can we do? It's a big region, Queensland. Common sense would tell you it's probably difficult to service that region with, you know, 1 staff across each of the regions. So I guess part of the strategy of the business is to be able to grow that, those foot soldiers, and whether they be foot soldiers that we can grow through a sporting schools model paid through federal government, or whether that's an investment, greater investment from QTF to more resources, whether that be casual part-time. That's something that we need to look at. But we're certainly keen and working with regions and affiliates to answer the question of, you know, how do we get more access to development staff in that sort of process. So it's certainly a big question that we need to figure out with the limited resources. How do we prioritise what they do? They can only do so much in the period of the time they've got. So it's really looking, like Matt said, what are the outcomes we're looking for, and how do we best achieve those in the current COVID environment, and certainly looking at how we plan for post-COVID to really be able to hit the ground running and provide support where it needs to be provided.
Thanks, Greg. It's probably bouncing a little all over the shop with this one, but a really great question. So Gavin, I might shoot back to you, and Greg, you might be able to provide some input on this also. But with the governance and recommendations, you stated earlier, Gavin, that we're moving, given the current climate, we're still moving forward. Can you outline what that next step actually looks like? I mean, you talked about, you know, getting people on board, you know, prior to, but what is actually the next step physically so we can progress down that path?
Greg, you want me? Yeah.
You go, Gav, sure.
Yeah, so to me is obviously the recommendations about the governance model. The idea about the Zoom meetings that we're doing here is to try and obviously get as much information out of people on the ground and people involved in the sport, because everyone on this Zoom meeting is here for one reason, is that they love the sport of touch. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. Generally, people who are paid are here they do a lot more hours than what they get paid for. People who are volunteer do a lot more hours probably than they do at their normal job. Everyone loves touch. So it's about getting the information on what the governance model, what they want to try and make sure they achieve out of it. And I'll again refer back to Matt, is working in a collaborative approach to make certain that we understand that it's about, this whole document is about making sure that we can remove duplication, and administration and things like that are the areas that keep coming up, that we just got abundance of administration that can be eliminated, and working together to try and find out what is best for our sport, to try and combat competitors that we do have now. Like 10 or 15 years ago, I've been playing everyone here, like generally people who are involved in touch are lifelong people, is that we, like 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have competitors such as OzTag and TRL. We need to make certain that we're looking at all of at our model, everything that in these documents point to us making sure that we have a look at ways to make our model a lot sharper to be able to combat them. So, Rach, moving forward, is that, like, we want to try and make certain that we touch base about the best model, as in the best way to try and achieve the things out of these recommendations and the review. So we want to, over the next month or so, is having to have more of these meetings, making sure that we answer all the questions, because there's always doubts from people about, because everyone, like, generally in change, everyone expects the worst or thinks the worst. That takeover is a word used regularly, is that we want to try and make certain we answer all them questions, make sure people are comfortable to speak across all levels in the sport, to sit down and get to a point where this is the best for the sport and how we're going to achieve it. So to me, the way forward over the next 3-4 weeks is if any affiliate or any region or any person's got a question, is that we get it out there, because and answer it, because you probably guarantee someone else is thinking the same. But in the end, we want to make certain that everyone understands that QTF board, regional people, affiliate people are all there for touch, and we're on the same level about achieving something for our sport and making it a better for someone, for your child to run around in, for a masters player or an administration or even a board, just to enjoy the sport better because it's more streamlined. And again, I'll refer back to Matt. Like, I mean, the way he spoke, you can just kind of, you just get the feeling that it's a much better place to be in, because of the duplications gone in certain areas. They can concentrate on getting more people out to teaching our kids and other people on the sport. So that's where I see us going, Rach. Greg, did you want to add on anything onto that?
I'll just add, in terms of the original communications and activation plan, obviously we need to update those into more realistic timeframes based around COVID and the resourcing that we have. Through the questions, there's some pretty key questions that come forward in a lot of the questions. So there's obviously a big project around what the governance model will look like. And that's a big piece of work that we need to look at. So what's the constitution look like? What are the voting rights? How's it going to work? What's going to happen with the current entities? All those sorts of things. So that's a project that needs to be looked at. And there's probably some upfront, there's probably some operational work that needs to be done as a priority around how does it look in a development workforce where we can get more foot soldiers on the ground. We've got more understanding of what the key priorities are. And that's probably the first two pieces we'll look at.
Well, that's under recommendation 3.1, is that has to be, the staff structure has to be implemented before the actual governance side of things. So that's correct. Yeah. So that, if you haven't looking at the actual the recommendations, the 3.1 is probably the one that you want to try and highlight on for people that are looking at the document.
I think there's a key aspect there, and just building on what Gavin was saying earlier, today is that we have a number of regions that are on board and a couple of regions that aren't. we need to get approval in principle so we can actually go forward with consultation, so we can actually develop and refine this model. We recognise that we don't have full agreement with the way the model is at the moment, but a key priority for us moving forward is to actually initiate consultation. But to do that, we have to get approval in principle. It's a concept, it's a starting point, it's not an end point. And it's important that we actually get the regions to consult and for us to work with the regions to actually develop that and take it forward. So I think that's a key aspect for part of this program.
Thanks, Cal. Matt, did you have something further to add to that?
Yes, I'd love to. Just from a practical perspective, you know, we just going back a step at SQBD, and as the president, I'm responsible for this. So I and our board has been unhappy with the level of service we've been able to give our affiliates historically. So we jumped on board here to change that. We want to give better service to our affiliates, and the governance review gave us a pathway forward. And so even before we worry about what the SQBD board looks like in the future, what we can focus on today for the benefit of the entire sport is what the operational model looks like. And we're fortunate to be in a position where we can test that, and we can work with Greg and Gavin and everyone else and build a development model through trial and error and through bouncing the ideas we've got up on the table right now into a model that works. And what we'd love to be able to do is to share that model once we've put it into stone. Now that we're back at touch and we can actually do some development work, we can get people out and about. We want to share that with all the regions, and we want your input into that as well, so that we can test an operational model that delivers positive outcomes for existing and new affiliates. And let's refine that, and let's let it be customized into each of the regional spaces so that it fits the distances and specific requirements. But let's make sure that we take this advantage for operational outcomes, and the governance will fall. I believe the governance will fall into place. If we deliver operationally, we will know what the governance model will need to be.
Thanks, Matt. And that's it, isn't it? There's a lot to it, but I think we might leave it there. But just to reiterate, you know, the next step is to provide clarity to our regions and affiliates. So like Gavin said, ask us your questions. We're open, transparent. We'll answer them as best as we can with the information we have on hand. But the next step is to provide that clarity, and so we can move forward. Gavin, Greg, did you have any final comments prior to the close of this session tonight?
Yeah, I'll just say thank you for everyone to jumping on board. And again, I'll just to further on what Rach says, if you've got any questions, feel free to ring, email, do anything, because I guarantee someone else there will be thinking exactly what you are, but we're all in this together, and we just got to make certain that you take a step away, you have a look at what's best for the sport, and you try and make certain, because in the end, it's a sport that we love. So just, yeah, thanks everyone for their time, and yeah, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Gavin. We do hope you found this session informative, and we will continue to provide forums of information sharing and feedback for affiliates, to receive feedback from affiliates and regions. So we do really appreciate you taking the time tonight out of your busy schedules. We might leave it there. Greg, all good from you?
Yeah, that's great,
yeah.
Frank. We'll touch base with some of those additional questions. But I'll just say what came back from the review is some recommendations that we need to fit into our current sporting landscape. So it doesn't mean that everything's a fait accompli, and there's some big plan that's already been hatched. A lot of it's a lot of hard work that needs to be done collectively and in consultation to come up with a model that's going to improve the way our sport operates and the governing model. So it doesn't mean we've got every solution and every answer. It means we need to work hard to find better ways to achieve better outcomes across the sport. So collectively, you know, we're keen to work with affiliates and regions to that outcome. So no doubt we'll be in touch soon. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you, everyone. I hope you all have an enjoyable evening, and I'll talk to you all soon, no doubt.